good old-fashioned country song called Cold Fire.
And welcome to Rush Roundtable, episode 203. This is not a love song. This isn't Fantasyland. This is Cold Fire. And I'd like to thank our panel for joining us today. We've got Rob, we've got Alex, and we've got David, and your host, Paul. So without any further ado, and before I forget, also, please do like and subscribe. And if you want to join this esteemed panel, please follow the instructions below. Send us an email, and you too can be on here and talk with us. Please do. We talk about Cold Fire off Counterparts. Let's, without further ado, get into it, shall we? So, opening instrumentation, starting off with Alex, kicking it off hard, and Getty doing a vocalization with the song title, Cold Fire, and then Neil kicking it in there from there, and then the bass starts up, and the first verse. It was long after midnight when we got to unconditional love. She said, sure, my heart is boundless, but don't push my limits too far. I said, if love is so transcendent, I don't understand these boundaries. She said, just don't disappoint me. You know how complex women are. Gentlemen, what say you?
Say this is not a love song.
Oh. Nope.
Say this is Neil Peart making it a point to say, all right, I got to write about human relationships in the more direct fashion, but I don't want it to be cheesy. And of course he succeeded. It's not cheesy. I love the fact.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. All right, I'll make it quick. I love the fact that in this case, because Paul and I were certainly discussing how do we want to regard some of the sections, because in Rush fashion, they have overt verses and choruses, but they have these other vocal sections that you're thinking, is this the verse? Is it pre-chorus? Is it a bridge? Is it a second chorus? And the idea that beginning with the lyrics in the intro, and then, of course, to jump ahead, the lyrics in the outro, they just make it a point to have the lyrics throughout. It's right away, it's different. Anyway, I'll be quiet. I'll move on because I feel like I'm already dominating. I'd like to hear what Dave has to say.
No, that's always outstanding. I'm just going to talk about the instrumentation. It starts out really exemplifying how heavy or how serious this conversation is going to be, right? And then, with the opening lyrics, the title of the song, I'm only speculating. But when we think of love and romance, fire that burns, passion, this is a cold fire. This is where it gets down to the brass tacks of, actually being with, another person. And it's not all, as we will read later, it's not all fantasy land. And so it's real. And what's great about this record, like every Rush record, it really pushes the real, and Neil does that in his lyrics. And we've talked about how the Counterparts album obviously is about human relationships, different kinds of relationships, about duality, but now even with the title, we have almost kind of a duality between, again, that passionate fire of love and romance, but it can be cold as well.
Yeah, I think
So
even
now
two
I'll
years
stop.
old. I was going to add that the song itself went through a lot of rewrites and iterations, and Peter was the one that kind of was the person that stepped in to kind of pull it together, because they wanted to write, and serve Neil's lyrics, but they didn't want to make it, as was covered in the beginning, it was, hokey or like a cheesy kind of song. So for that reason, they really spent, a deal of time trying to get it right. And even just the way the song opens, it opens kind of strong. And then you have this nice, sort of sublime musical tapestry happening to kind of, okay, now it's more sensitive now. So I like that part. And really, again, the Counterparts theme is right there, just musically. So, and that beginning part, the guitar, as I think Getty referenced, it was like a steel guitar, I think he was saying. And it always reminded me like a head scratch, the beginning, that little, 4-part hit that Alex does. Like it was like a head scratching thing to me, to my ears. It kind of reminded me of like, thinking, or maybe like things being rubbed together to start a fire. So
never really thought about that.
Yeah.
Friction.
Yeah, I didn't think of that either, but that makes total sense.
Yeah. I wonder
And
if
then
they listen to these episodes, and go, wow, that's what we meant.
exactly. And I probably should have
We
added
can
this
only
on
hope.
the first part. I'll be around if you don't let me down too far. I'll be around if you don't let me down. It doesn't necessarily, it's isolated from the rest, but again, as Alex had mentioned, he and I had talked, is this a refrain? Is this a pre-chorus? The songwriting style here, Neil definitely doing the whole there's the narrative speak that he writes in lyrically. It's a conversation. It's there's he said, she said in there, but then it's also and let me lay the story out for you, and then the different voices come up. And I want to say this is the only time, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is the only time Geddy sings that with only one vocal line. The rest it's at least doubled. And I did notice that later on, sometimes it's dissonant and sometimes it's consonant, where sometimes it's pleasing to listen to, and sometimes I'm not, again, the difference between consonant and dissonant, you can almost hear the vocal, the doubled lines at odds with each other. And I absolutely believe, like everything they write, it's intentional. So I think this is the only one that's sung as a single line, I believe.
I think so, because I mean, it's pretty much. It seemed like it was also between Peter Collins and Caveman, maybe the production style of we're just gonna. It's direct, it's basic, it's stripped down. That I mean, it's certainly how many bands was I in even in the '90s where it's like, oh, we got to sound like we sound in practice when we record. So everyone was searching for that. How do we sound live on the recording? So it's like direct guitar scratching in. You got the suspended and the D and the G happening there, but then it's like, all right, let's thicken the song up as we go along, much like other songs on this album did. Oh, and also looking at and in some ways I gauge based on some of the even it's like, what did the transcribers say? And not that these people were always correct, obviously. I mean, the Queensryche Empire book riddled with mistakes. That's a different year. That's a different
Also
band.
produced by Peter Collins. Sorry.
That's true. Just not transcribed by this guy. This guy did a pretty good job. But in this case, looking at like the song sections, the verse, basically F sus2, 4 measures, A minor, 2 measures, F, 4 measures, A minor. So it is essentially when we get into that kind of like second part of the verse where we bring in F, G, A minor. So it's basically they just sort of filtered in an extra chord in a way where it's, if you don't let me down, by the time Geddy sings you, and unfortunately we do have the doubling of the vocals here transcribed too. When he sings the word you, a C with a G harmony over it, that's where they bring in the G as the power chord. So Geddy sings the fourth and then harmonizes the octave. So it's kind of like, yeah, they're just sort of filtering into, back to the verse. But that's for Paul to read. I'm just going to put this book away.
Or now, hopefully reference it again. So a little bit of time clearly has gone on because it was just before sunrise when we started on traditional roles. She said, sure, I'll be your partner, but don't make too many demands. I said, if love has these conditions, I don't understand those songs you love. She said, this is not a love song. This isn't Fantasyland. Gentlemen.
Well, this isn't Madrigal from Farewell to Kings.
Very true.
Almost Closer to Tears, which of course Geddy wrote the lyrics for that on 2112. But again, just reality here, and talking about one, they've been up all night. It was just before sunrise, so they're having this very long conversation, and he's trying. He almost takes the way Neil wrote this is counterintuitive if you follow stereotypes, right? He's the one that's saying, well, hey, what about these love songs and all of these things, and she's the one, you know, uh, speaking a little bit more straightforward and reality and rational. Again, stereotypes. But I like the way even here back, and this album does that on a lot of songs. But he takes stereotypes, and even back in 1993, just challenges them, flips them over, and that's an attractive feature about this whole record, but this song in particular.
Great.
And you think about how many times, I mean, in our age group, and possibly an age group of many of the people who might be sitting on the other side of the lens from this, or they're watching this, you think back to maybe early days, 20 something, whatever, and how many conversations that might have begun with a significant other at 11 at night, 10 at night, and you're just like, it's freaking 3 a.m. and it's talking like that. It's that. So which I think is interesting, because obviously the three of them had been with their wives, partners since the 70s basically. So they were years, decade 15 years. I mean, Leifson and his wife have been together since 70. So I mean, they'd been with their significant others for a long time. So this is kind of like him clearly reaching back or acknowledging something that you might be involved with in a new relationship, which for those guys, that was, I don't want to say old hat, that sounds cynical, but it had been a while. I assume.
Them. Yeah, they matured into them by then.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And not that, I mean, if any of them, if Getty or Alex are watching and they wanted to call up and say, hey, yeah, we were having those talks in 1990, it's like, feel free to call me. I'll take that call.
That would be a call for sure.
This would be the first thing they'd bring up. Actually, I remember hearing this. I was 22 when I heard this, and not going to go into a long anecdote, but a very short one was the fact that I got this album after the most significant breakup of my life. And this line, for starters, this was my first favorite song off the album. But this song was like a bucket of cold water on my head, because I remember listening to this at the time under my very jaded perception. And that line, I remember like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And now that I listen to it, I am the dumb guy. I am the, I look back now and I'm like, she's being very realistic.
Yeah.
And, oh, okay. So I hear it through quite different ears now in 2023. So
sure.
But more mature ears. Well, a little bit more mature. So into the chorus, and again with they're written in parentheses, but I love the back and forth here. The don't go too far. A phosphorescent wave on a tropical sea is a cold fire. Don't cross the line. The pattern of moonlight on the bedroom floor is a cold fire. Don't let me down. The flame at the heart of a pawnbroker's diamond is a cold fire. Don't break the spell. The look in your eyes as you head for the door is a cold fire. I'll be around if you don't push me down too far. I'll be around if you don't push me down. And repeated. I'll be around if you don't push me down too far. I'll be around if you don't push me down.
Yeah, there's a bit of ground rules there, and she obviously has history in this story that's going on, and she doesn't want to have that happen again. So she, I'll be here for you if you accept these terms of our agreement, so to speak, after hours of conversation. So I think it's really good, because that's very relatable. And I think even for the guys, in their relationships, touring and everything else, they probably had these conversations, I'll be around if you don't stay on tour for, 10 years in a row, kind of thing. It's like, I am here. So I think there's a bit of personal history, even though you're never given specific information, nor do we need that. But I think it's something that, that's the hardest part of what they were trying to do with the song in terms of putting it together, is how do we represent these things without sounding like a love song, which it is not. It's a relationship song. So it's like all these relationship issues come up, so it's I love this part of the tune, by the way. So.
And that's not so unreasonable. If you don't push me down too far, I'll be around. If you keep me on an even plane, don't push me down too far. If you keep me in an even plane, I'll be around. That's not unreasonable.
Yeah, but and even the music is intense here, reflecting that very notion.
Right. But
And
I
the
love those metaphors: a phosphorescent wave on a tropical sea, pattern of moonlight on the bedroom floor, the flame. That's the line that got me because, as a
yeah.
personal anecdote, I compared the flame at the heart of the pawnbroker's diamond. That did go through my head back then. I'm like, yeah, yeah.
I hate to admit, because I feel like this is a good way to be yelled dorky about this, because who would be dorky if we're talking about Rush songs? But when I wind up hearing them at this point in my head, the song just plays in my head. I wind up thinking of the Simpsons episode where they had the teachers were on strike. So you had, like Willie or the old guy from Grandpa Simpson's old age home teaching, and that became the meme of that's a paddling. So he's listing off with all these things would be a paddling, and I just keep thinking a phosphorescent wave on a tropical sea, that's a cold fire. Pattern moonlight on the bedroom floor, that's a cold fire. And then the idea, flame at the heart of a pawnbroker's diamond, that's a cold fire. Just stuff like that. It's yeah, I know it's the stuff that your brain does. What Rob was saying, speaking to the intensity of the chorus. I mean, he's bringing back the riff, which kind of has that EDA type of thing, kind of a 1-4-5 in the key of G, but he makes it, in Life's in Fashion, a little more ambiguous with suspensions and whatnot. But Getty's pedaling an A, so that can be kind of Mixolydian, but he also pedals an F at times, which that adds the tension, because certainly A to F, that's your minor sixth. In what Lifeson's playing, there are points when he hits an F sharp. So obviously he's creating that flat 9 in there at times with Getty hitting the F. So there's, as they say, like, 4 measures of A and 2 of F or 4 of A, something like that. But I feel bad that I'm not being accurate here. But the fact that, they obviously came in with that very distinct rock Mixolydian, then it's like, I'm going to go for an F bass line, pedal tone, check that out, back to the check out that F again. So the instrumentation there, it's like, it's no joke.
And for a penultimate song on the album itself, there's a lot going on in these choruses. I mean, they're all very, very busy.
Yeah, and on some level, you think
that intensity.
Like, it's kind of a simple song. No, not really.
No,
it's like deceptively, where you're thinking, oh, that's the riff, that's the verse part. Oh, there's a little more happening here.
Yeah. I did my usual prep by watching isolate or listening to covers to isolate each instrument. Even knowing they were complex, I was floored by. So that's the bass line for this. How do you sing and play that? I mean, to revert back to my typical Rush fanboy level, how the hell do you do that? But all 3 of them are very, very active, particularly in the choruses.
Yeah.
And the outro, but we're not there yet. And just real quick, again, on the vocal line, that I love that David, correct me where I'm wrong, because you're the one who got me interested in observing this kind of thing, but the call and response of don't go too far. A phosphorus, that I'm stating
Yeah,
this.
it seems to have kind of like that polyphonic quality of,
Thank you.
back and forth. And one thing about that verse too that I was just going to mention, I'll do it real quick. Those first things, phosphorescent wave on a tropical sea, the pattern of moonlight on the bedroom floor. These are all aesthetically pleasing things, right? But then all of a sudden, the look in your eyes as you head for the door, so we go from descriptions of natural beauty to it turns it on its head once again,
Yep.
and sometimes, just listening to a song like this, it's a great riff. It rocks. It's a wonderful song. But then, as happens often with Rush songs, you start thinking about them, and they can be hard, but that's another reason we love them. Music that makes you think.
Which takes us into the solo.
Rob?
Gorgeous solo. Very, very sensitive. He builds it really nicely. The underpinnings of the harmonies while he's doing his thing are very much like the verse section. Very, very calm, but then getting out of the solo, the intensity revs up again. So now you have that sort of musical sensibility is flipped around as well as what was happening in the lyrics. So there's all this counterparts going on in this song. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But I love the solo. It's just, you can't, again, with Alex, you can't think of anything else that he would play on that part of the song. There's nothing else you could think of. He just has, he has the gift, he has he has the mojo. He knows what to do and when to do it and how it's presented. It's just, it's, I don't know what to say.
It almost, to me, if you think of a all night conversation like is going on in this song, and that solo are those moments of silence,
Mm.
right? Reflection, that happens in conversations like that where nobody says anything, And of course, earlier in the album, there's a reference to we don't have to talk, we don't even have to touch, right? That sort of thing. But that's very different from the kind of silence that's going
Much more
on in
comfortable.
the song. Yeah, the other one was happier. This is that kind of reflective. We're thinking this through, and then moving on to the next topic, traditional roles or whatever.
First, I mean, one thing since it was brought up, one of the things I learned early on in lessons was the concept of call and response in solos. And I think the first teacher who mentioned that to me, we were talking about breaking the chains from Dokken as far as the way George Lynch structured that solo. But most of Alex Lifeson's solos, he does something like that. Like in, certainly YYZ is a good example where you have 4 measures and the 4th measure has a held note with some vibrato. This solo does the same thing, but certainly not 4 measures. It's a blast of notes in some space, and then of course at the end of it, those bends that are kind of the standard rock, unison bends that just takes them back into the riff. So there's kind of they're keeping it in touch with that foundational rock vibe, which is where my brain would think, oh, it's kind of simple there because it's a rock song, but no, it isn't. Just saying.
And it's got that intensity of like this conversation it's already heated, but now it's or intense might be a better, more accurate word.
Perfect. Yeah. I mean, the intensity of the solo. It's fluid. It has space, but there is the intensity that it becomes part of the score to whatever they're talking about at this point that's bound to resolve pretty soon.
One way or another.
Yeah.
Like we found with Double Agent. There is a resolution coming. We don't know what it's going to be, but it's coming. And since the lyrics are going to be repetitive at this point, I want to get us through them. Back to the chorus, or what we decided was the chorus. Don't go too far. Phosphorescent wave on a tropical. And notice the change in drums here. They picked up. I'm not a drummer, so drummers, please forgive me. But I know there's even more fills and the addition of more percussion in here at this point. Don't go too far. A phosphorescent wave on a tropical sea is a cold fire. Don't cross the line. The pattern of moonlight on the bedroom floor is a cold fire. Don't let me down. The flame at the heart of pawnbroker's diamond is a cold fire. Don't break the spell. The look in your eyes as you head for the door is a cold fire. I'll be around if you don't let me down too far. I'll be around if you don't let me down. And then repeated, I'll be around if you don't push me down too far. I'll be around if you don't push me down. I'll be around if you don't let me down. Into the outro. It's a cold fire. Love is blind if you are gentle. It's such a cold fire. Love can turn to a long, cold burn.
Now, the transcriber of that book was talking about this final "I'll be around if you don't let me down" as the coda, but whatever. It's. I mean, that sometimes can speak to how people choose to write out the books. I mean, much like Steve Vai, when he was transcribing for Zappa, was saying, well, I could write it out like this and you'll make more money, right? And Frank, now do it the way we play it. So, there's that variability, but the way we have it on our screens here, as far as the lyrics, it really does turn into more coda outro, which makes sense. And of course, at the final chorus and coda, they put on an overdub higher guitar part too. So he has his lower power chordy arpeggio, and then he has some higher chords in there to thicken up the ending, because as we've been talking about, it just builds up. Vocals are expanded, instrumentation's expanded. Watch the Auburn Hills, and Neil's slamming the hell out of those drums, especially once we get at this point into the song.
And Getty's doubled up vocals on that. I believe that last "I'll be around" is dissonant, if memory serves. that's when he hits his highest notes. And I want to say the lower registered vocal is dissonant. It's like, how is this going to end? I mean, obviously they're great about leaving things open to interpretation, but if nothing else, I know that it definitely tense.
Well, according to our friend the transcriber, he especially at that I'll Be Around, he scooped up in from a B to a C on the main line, kept a C C B C, and the harmony at the scoop of the B, he kept it as a power chord harmony from F sharp to C, G, sorry, and then his high note, his high harmony was up to A and then back down to G, and then down to E, and that was listed as the highest note. Because then the harmonies, he drops it down to A, and the harmony moves down. So he's keeping a lot of them as just fifths, but obviously the C is a sixth, so that's kind of standoutish at that point there. And with Push Me Down, there was a harmony of a seventh. So the me part, the main vocal is G up to A, and the harmony sustained as an F. So a seventh that worked its way down to a flat six. There's a little bit of a dissonant vibe there at that point.
Okay.
Yeah. Because everyone watching the Rush Fans channel wants to get into music theory.
Want to learn. The only way we learn is through talking and communicating. If the song has taught us anything, apparently. Live versions.
Auburn Hills.
2 tours, so right, Counterparts and Test for Echo, but Auburn Hills seems to be the definitive one we can find online.
Yeah,
and then different stages, right?
Was it on different stages?
Was it?
I'm not sure.
I was looking the other night, and I don't recall it being on there.
Oh, you know what?
Yeah, I feel like they
I'll
left
find
that
out
as
real quick.
I was gonna say, if only we had one handy.
Yeah, if someone actually had an album around here. Honestly, mine are like totally in another room, so I can't get to them quickly. But yeah, I feel like it wasn't. In which case, like they were going for this as being the dark horse that is super popular as a song, but it's like, guess what? We're not going to do live,
Yeah.
No, it was not on
No.
CDs of different states. I didn't think it was, but
Yeah.
you made me doubt for a second. I had to go find out.
Well, it should have been.
I kind of wish it would. Yeah.
Clearly, that's where my mind went.
Mhm.
I was at that show. I'm like, I remember it. I know they played it.
Yep.
Yeah, there are only a few songs from the album they played live, and I think even Neil for Cold Fire, he loved the song lyrically and what it says and how it was put together, but he didn't care. He felt the love wasn't shared with how the songs were sequenced on the album. So he's like, I love the song, but it wasn't a shared view, I guess, from where it's placed on the record. So it was kind of funny how he pointed that out at the time. So
No, funny you mentioned, because Alex, do you have handy the interview with Mark Allen that we were able to pull off Tapes Archive?
Sitting just on my screen to the left of this screen.
Excellent. Neil did an interview with Mark Allen, Canadian rock journalist, and he talked at great length and great detail about Cold Fire. It's a transcription, so it's close.
So yes, a transcription with some run-on sentences, since it's just speech. So ellipses, ... They're not by any stretch autobiographical. Obviously, he's talking about the lyrics. I just, again, had a concept to deal with and what love was and how people stayed together. So I invented characters to dramatize my scene, with Cold Fire, an example of that, and The Speed of Love. On previous records, I've done that on songs like Ghost of Chance or on the song Presto itself with an imaginary couple having a disagreement. And I was playing, I learned, I guess, from Paul Simon, not the guy on the screen, but unless he was hanging in Chicago and just spying on you, which would have been awesome. But anyway, he learned from Paul Simon, the famous singer, the idea of putting a conversation together in the song. He said, she said idea. I thought it was a very cool way for me to present opposing viewpoints. And in Cold Fire, I wanted to set it up. But, again, this is a real life love story. And there are two of the two characters. The woman is the smart one. So it was a delicate bit of tradecraft, just the craft that it took to create these characters and then set up the balance of their relationships so that it's not obnoxious. I don't think to the listener that the woman is the smart one and the guy is the dumb one, or asking dumb questions, but the conclusions become obvious that I'll be around if you don't push me down too far. This is a realistic evaluation of what keeps people together as long as you live up to each other's expectations and you are still the same person they plighted their trust to, or whatever will maintain their love. Yeah, the run-on sentences are kind of like, wait, hang on. Anyway, a little bit more to go, so I'll get to it. Back to Neil. And I thought there was a little more real. It was a little more realistic than the idea that love is made in the stars and will last forever at some moment of bliss. Frank Zappa did an interview shortly before his death, and someone asked him, weird transcription, you'd never write love songs, Frank. And he said, well, no, not only are love songs stupid, but they're destructive. And they have probably destroyed more relationships over the past few generations than anything else. It creates an unrealistic expectation of what a relationship is supposed to be and what Prince Charming and Cinderella are supposed to be like while they live happily ever after. That whole myth. I agree with him. Again, it's not only dumb, all those love songs, but they are actively destructive and do cause people to have unreal fantasies of what their lives will be like and to be disappointed, obviously, and disillusioned by them. End of the quote. Which that makes me think of the movie High Fidelity, where John Cusack poses the question in the beginning of the movie, am I unhappy, or type of thing, because I listen to love songs, or that kind of thing. And I'm butchering the quote, but watch High Fidelity. It's in the beginning of the movie.
I'm miserable because I listen to pop music, or I listen to pop music because I was miserable.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you.
Closing thoughts, gentlemen.
Fade out. I like the fade out. It's like the story is to be continued, I guess. That's probably why they did that. I don't know the reasoning. It's not a hard stop, So
yeah, that last line, very last line, love can turn to a long, cold burn. So very realistic, but still open-ended, because it can, but maybe it doesn't. Maybe expectations, boundaries are all set, and they live happily ever after. At least, that's the hope.
Right.
Yeah, powerful song. I mean, it's another example of a Rush B-side that is absolutely fantastic.
And I love the fact that it's positioned just before Everyday Glory. Wow. Talk about your roller coasters.
Mm-hmm. Can't wait for that episode. Whoever's going to be on that, I'm going to look forward to listening to that one.
And if you'd like to be on an episode like this, again, shoot us an email. In the meantime, do please like, subscribe, and never miss Great Rush content on here. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time.